Hi beauties, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a new series. It's a new series. In today's video, I'm going to kick off a new series. And what better way to kick off my top 5 anything than to start with eyeshadow. So if you'd like to find out more, then just keep watching. So as I mentioned, this is going to be a new series all about top 5 products, and it's not just going to be about favorite products. It may be my least favorite products. It may be my top 5 products that wasted my money. You never know. It could be something like my top 5 overhyped products. Anything. If there's a particular top 5 topic you'd like for me to film a video on, be sure to leave that in the comments down below. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for joining me for today's video. And if you're new to my channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button as well as turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of my uploads. So today's video is going to be all about eyeshadow palettes, and these are my most loved eyeshadow palettes. That doesn't mean it's my most used eyeshadow palette, nor does it mean that it's my favorite eyeshadow palette. These are palettes that I hold near and dear to my heart for some reason or another. I use these palettes quite a bit, but there are some other eyeshadows that I use even more than these. These are the ones that I love, love, love so much, and I would replace them in a heartbeat if something were to ever happen to them. So let's go ahead and talk about them, and these are going to be ranked in order. So let's start with my number 5 eyeshadow palette. My number 5 most loved eyeshadow palette is the Natasha Denona Bronze Palette. Probably the reason that it's number 5 and not closer to the top is it's the newest in my collection as far as these palettes are concerned. It's my newest palette. The reason this one is a most loved palette is the color scheme of this palette is just perfect for me and my complexion. I mean, if you look at this, does any other palette scream my skin tone, my complexion? It's just perfect for a caramel colored girl. I just love it. I think that that's the reason that I love this one so much. I just think it looks beautiful on my skin tone. That's the first reason that I love it. Also, I have used every single shade in this palette. Sometimes you buy palettes and you don't use every color. There's a couple, 2 or 3 colors that you just don't touch. But this one, I've been able to use every single shadow. The eyeshadows in this palette are so creamy and buttery and absolutely stunning on the eye. So I'm gonna swatch a few of my favorites here. You can probably tell which shades I use the most. This shade here is, I think, my favorite in the palette, and this one I think is called Silk. And let me swatch it for you guys here. I mean, wow. Oh my goodness, guys. And I love Alloy. I'm just gonna swatch a few. True Copper. Here are just a few of the shimmer shades that I absolutely am in love with, and they all look beautiful and stunning on my eye. They complement each other so well. They blend together on the eye and just create such a cohesive look when you put an eye look together using these shadows. I use this palette to create the look that I'm wearing today, and I have this deeper shade here all over my lid, and it's sort of a plummy, it's got some purple and brown in the color. It's such a unique deep shade. It looks black in the pan, but it's more of a deep brown plummy shade, and it is such a beautiful color. This color and this deeper color here for deepening the outer V. Whenever you have on a half cut crease, it deepens the outer V. You have beautiful crease shades here. So I just absolutely love this palette, and it's just beautiful for everyday eyeshadow looks. Like, these are the $65 palettes, so it's a little bit more affordable than some of her previous eyeshadow palettes. The formula of this palette is just magnificent. This color here has like a shift. It shifts from pink to gold, like a duochrome eyeshadow. There's just so much that you can do with this palette, even though it kind of has a lot of similar shades in it. I just have enjoyed it so much, and I am so happy that I purchased it. It was catapulted to my holy grail list and has become my 5th most loved eyeshadow palette. My 4th most loved eyeshadow palette is one that everyone else doesn't necessarily talk about that much, but I love this palette. This is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina palette. I'll go ahead and tell you guys that the Soft Glam palette is not one of my most loved palettes, even though I use that one more than I use this one. When I use this one, I just feel warm inside. I feel the most joy when I use the Norvina palette for some reason. They came out around the same time, one behind the other, but I just like this one more, and I use that one more than this one. So the color scheme, it leans purple, the color scheme of this palette, but I don't necessarily feel like I always have a purple look whenever I use this palette. I love it a lot because of this one eyeshadow right here. This one is Rose Gold, very simple name. This Rose Gold eyeshadow looks absolutely stunning on my lid whenever I use it. So it is the most used shadow in the palette. And when I reviewed this palette, I created a makeup look when I bought this palette, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. That's why you just can't believe those first impressions type of videos. The more I created the look throughout that video, the more I was falling in love with it. Like this earthy color here, they just all blend so beautifully together. And this one here, whatever this color is, whenever I kind of use those in the crease and the outer V, they just create the most gorgeous looks. I use everything on the top row. I've been leaving this palette here at my home because I never want anything to happen to it, but I decided to take it with me so that I could wear it to work because I just love it, and I think that this creates pretty fall looks as well. But I am just in love with this palette. It is my most loved Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. I have the JACLYN palette as well. I have Modern Renaissance. That one is near and dear to my heart too, because it was one of the first eyeshadow palettes that I purchased, and everyone was hyping it up at the time, and I really enjoyed that palette too. But there's something about this one that just makes me happy. This purple here is just so pretty on the eye. Maybe it creates very unique looks. It makes me happy. So this one is my number 4 as far as my most loved eyeshadow palettes. I had to change my battery. If you notice something different, that's why. My 3rd most loved eyeshadow palette has to be the JACLYN Hill palette. I think that I love this palette because it was one of those palettes that everyone anticipated. It was the first time I was purchasing a palette that everyone wanted, that was selling out online like that. I had to sit and wait at the launch time online to put it in my cart and check out really fast before it sold out. I remember sitting at the computer waiting for the 12 o'clock time or whatever it was that it was launching in my time zone, and like clicking. I just remembered the experience of trying to purchase this palette when it launched, and it just sold out 2 or 3 or 4 times every single time it came back in stock. It was amazing. I just loved it. I was really happy for JACLYN that she had this collab. This palette, I believe, was her first collaboration. The only thing I didn't love about it was that it didn't have the names of the shadows, but I actually bought a silver pen and wrote the names on the shadows myself. I'm not sure if you guys can see how I've written the names there. Do you see that? That's love. That's love. I can remember when I purchased this palette that particular year, that first year that I had it, I probably wore it on my channel more than any other palette. Every time I was thinking of creating a look, this was the palette that I needed for the look that I wanted to wear. I just kept grabbing the same palette. Just like with the bronze palette, this one is definitely brown girl friendly. It has all of the shadows in it that I would love. The shadows that I probably use the least are these cooler and punchy colors over here. The purple and the teal, they're not necessarily my jam, but I have used these shadows. But over here, all of this over here, that is all day me. So some of the shadows that I love a lot, 24/7, and then chip, let's do chip here. It's like a chocolate brown, and I'm liking all the chocolate browns. This one I dug into a lot here. Oh gosh. I tried to find the ones that I know I used to wear because I don't grab this one as much now, but I wore it so much in the past. So here are just some of the shadows that I remember loving. Ugh. I'm a half cut crease girl. I love half cut creases. They just work for my eye. And whenever I'm deepening the outer V or I need a dark color for the crease, you can find it over here, whatever you need. And the other thing I love about Morphe shadows in general is because you have so many shadows that are in the same color family, you can create gradients, just like what you see here on my eyes where you see lighter to dark. You can create gradients in your transition and your crease area by having eyeshadows that kind of stair step. So like you may start with transition somewhere in here or here, and you just keep building up color, and that's how you're always able to get these beautiful blended eyeshadow looks. And JACLYN Hill to me is just one of the best makeup artists on YouTube still, as far as how she blends and how blended and seamless and perfect her eyeshadow always looks. Like, girl. And to me, these types of palettes, the Morphe palettes in general, they allow you to get that type of look where you have a very blended look. It looks like you spent hours on your eyes and really you didn't. You just used different shadows to get there. So I just love this palette, and because I kind of had to fight to get it, and it was just an experience for me, experiencing that rush of trying to buy it when it launched, I just fell in love with the palette. It's a larger palette. It takes up a lot of space as far as storage, but it's one of those palettes that I think any makeup lover should have. It's like, it's one of those things that if everybody else is talking about it, you don't want to not know about this palette. Like, it's one of those that everyone needs to have. I love it. And if you haven't gotten it yet, it's not too late. My second most loved eyeshadow palette is this Urban Decay Born to Run palette. And I love this palette for a number of reasons. I like the packaging of this palette. It's the only one that Urban Decay has ever done like this that I have seen. It's Born to Run, and so the palette has all of these little scenic pictures of different things that you could be doing around the world. So I like that. That's a very unique cover. But the other reason I like this palette is my daughter purchased this for me for Christmas one year. It was at a time when I was actually working for Sephora, and I typically tell her and other people, even though you know I love makeup, don't buy me makeup from Sephora because I can get it at a discounted rate. Why pay regular price? Maybe get me a gift card that I can then use with my discount, but you know, don't waste your money buying something at regular price when I can get it 30% off. Even though I had previously told her not to purchase makeup from Sephora, in this case it was a good thing because I would never have picked this palette up. I wasn't really interested in purchasing this myself and I wouldn't have picked it up. But because she bought it for me, of course I'm gonna keep it, and I was like, well, I can add this to my collection, why not? It's probably good, you know? And oh boy, I was sleeping on it. I was sleeping on this, and so are a lot of other people. I think people sleep on this. Anastasia, Beverly Hills, and Urban Decay create some of my most favorite eyeshadow formulas. I love how they blend on the eye. I love the shimmers. I just always fall in love with the palettes that I buy that are made by those two companies. But I had no interest in picking this palette up for whatever reason. But my daughter bought it for me. I started using it, and I kind of sat back one day and said, I have worn this palette in so many looks on my channel, and I was also using it every day. And every time I sat down to film, I wanted this palette for whatever reason. It just could always create a look that complemented whatever I was wearing. It was just like with the JACLYN Hill palette. If you kind of compare them, you can see why. You know, this of course has fewer shadows, but look at how similar the colors are. Like, it's just like that palette. You have so many eyeshadows to choose from in here and so many different color schemes that it will go with anything you are wearing. The other thing I love about this palette is it has a black. So anytime you have a black in an eyeshadow palette, you can go from day to night like that. So I love that. It has this deeper chocolate. I have created looks with these fuchsia type colors here. Those are shimmers that I wear a lot from this palette. I don't use these as much over here, but I have used them. But I don't use them as much, just like JACLYN Hill. Don't use those as much. But everything else, all of these warmer colors, even the purple, I have worn. If you could still purchase this palette, I would recommend it. You can do a smoky eye. You got the gray and the black here. You can create any type of look. It's of course more warm in color, but there are some cool tones here, and you maybe could consider some of this to lean neutral. Like, you could create a variety of looks. Mattes, shimmers, everything you need is in this palette. The name of this palette tells you everything. They were trying to create a palette that you could just basically take this one palette when you're traveling and you don't have to take anything else. And really you could. Like, it's not too large. It's just large enough, but it has everything you need, and you don't need to take multiple eyeshadow palettes if you're traveling. So I love this palette. This one might surprise you guys because it goes way back. I think it kind of goes way back, maybe a few years here on my channel. I used to talk about this palette all the time, and I used it all the time. I just loved it so much. A lot of these that I'm talking to you guys about, I don't necessarily use all the time anymore, but I love them still more than a lot of the palettes that I've gotten recently. I just still love them. My number one palette as far as palettes that I love and adore, just love, is this Colored Raine Queen of Hearts palette. Colored Raine is an indie brand, and I love this palette. This was one that I was influenced to buy. JACLYN Hill talked about this in, I think, a yearly favorites. It was a favorites or yearly favorites video, and she talked about this palette. I'm not sure if she was wearing it at the time. Look at her. Look at her. I can't remember if she had it on her eyes at the time or what, but she mentioned this palette and maybe swatched a few shades, and I just said, I got to have her. I got to have this palette. I bought it and I wore this palette out. I don't know if it was because she mentioned it on her channel, but it sold out at one point and it remained sold out for a long time. I do think that you can get it now, but it was sold out for months, maybe a year. It was just gone. So I was just happy that I got it. And it was, again, another one of the palettes that when I purchased this palette, I wore it all the time. I wore it to work, I wore it on my channel, wore it all the time. Always had it on my vanity. Like, it just stayed there. It lived there. It was never put away. That's how much I love this palette. One of the things that I really liked, the transition shades, I would kind of mix these two together, and this orange as well. I might put that in my crease. So I just really thought these were perfect transition shades. And if I can find a palette that has beautiful transition colors, I just always end up with a really pretty look just by the transitions. But the shimmers were also just, oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, wait till I show you guys this. Just wait for it. These are the shimmers in this palette. Do you see this foiled goodness? Do you see that? If you look at the shimmers here, look how smooth they are on my skin. Like, the swatches are not patchy. I just swatched the one time, except for that lightest shade, that gray color. I had to go in the pan twice, but for all the others, that was just one swatch, and it just smoothed over my skin, completely covered my skin. And I think that when I would apply this to my eye, I got the same effect, like punch of color, didn't require a ton of blending. It covered all the skin and it didn't wear off throughout the day. These colors complemented each other. You could go really bold or you could just do really pretty daytime looks. And it wasn't intimidating because it was just a few shadows. There's 12 eyeshadows in the palette, so just enough to create the looks that you want, but not too much to make it very confusing when you start creating your looks. So I just enjoyed it. This white color here at the bottom, I didn't find myself using that much, but I'm sure it's helpful to somebody, but I didn't grab that one that much. I used every other shade in this palette. This mauve color, so if I was just trying to go with more of a pink color, I would incorporate that color. So I don't know what it was about this palette, but, well, I do know what it was. Beautiful. It was one of the first palettes that I fell really hard for. This was the first one that I fell in love with and probably started using when I was really getting my groove as far as knowing how to apply eyeshadow correctly and properly. So I was able to really create a lot of beautiful looks with this palette, and I just fell for her and did not want anything to happen to this eyeshadow palette. I just loved it so much, and I still do. I still love that palette and still would recommend, if you haven't picked it up and it's still available, that's a keeper if you like warm eyeshadows. That concludes my first top 5 video, and these again are the eyeshadows that I love, that are just near and dear to my heart. I have had such an amazing run with all of them. I don't want anything to ever happen to those palettes. If you saw one that you like, that you haven't picked up and don't have in your collection, I recommend them all. They are outstanding eyeshadow palettes. So I hope that you all have enjoyed today's video. If you will, leave a comment down below telling me your absolute most loved eyeshadow palette, and also be sure to tell me what you'd like for me to film next as it relates to my top 5. So if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below and I will respond. And if you've not already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button before you leave. So I'll be seeing you guys again very soon in my next video. So until the next time we meet again, this is Savvy signing out.